Teachers, what is the worst experience you have had with a student's parent? Story 1 had a fun class, and there was one joker kid who was asking questions about stuff that was coming up in the next chapter. I answered his question telling him to keep it in mind for the next chapter. A week or two later we get to that chapter. He mentions that he knows it, so I think it would be funny if he taught it using my slides while I sat in his chair and pretended to be a student. The kids thought it was great. He did a pretty good too. When he made a mistake, I'd pretend to ask a question with the correction built in. Everyone had a great time and seemed to learn a lot. Next week, the kid's parent come in and accuse me of picking on him and trying to embarrass him. At no point did they think to ask him if he had been embarrassed. They had tried to make an appointment with my principal to throw me under the bus without even talking to me. Luckily, he was awesome and just told him to go talk to me. Just goes to show you don't know what your students are telling their parents, and even if it's the truth, how parents are interpreting it. I feel bad for the kid cause he and I got along so great before that incident, but I wouldn't think of kidding around with him after that. Story 2, parent and child had a complaint about grading on a minor assignment. Parent emailed me. The principal, Board of Education, and Barack Obama. No reply from anyone, except the principal. Story 3, I once had a student hit me. I reported the student, and they were suspended. Mom was adamant that I had made the whole thing up, even though it was witnessed, and there was photographic documentation of the mark it left. The next year, that student's sibling was in my class. Mom had them removed after she found out, because this teacher has a clear vendetta against my children. The sibling was really upset and tried to say that I was always nice and helpful. But Mom wouldn't listen. She thought I was just lulling the sibling into a false sense of security before striking. I've been screamed at by parents, but for some reason this experience was far, far worse for me. Story 4, I teach at university, so my interaction with parents is very slight. But on a couple occasions, I've had angry parents call in my office wanting to talk about why their kid isn't doing well in my class. I'm required to tell them that I'm legally not allowed to confirm or deny any student's enrollment in my class, or discuss any student's progress in my class with anyone but the student, which ruffles a lot of parental feathers. On one occasion, ID said my spiel to a parent's, gotten the usual I pay their tuition, it's my money so it's my right, etc. in return, and had replied with, if you'd like to set up a proxy, you'll need to go to the registrar for a form which your son can fill out and sign, and that will allow me to talk to you. The parent totally lost their temper at that and yelled at me. He won ING sign IT, followed by a stream of verbal abuse and obscenities, mostly speculating on my parentage and educational attainment. Gosh, I just have no clue why your kid doesn't want to talk to you about his grades. PSA, if you are a college student, please be aware that your parents are not legally entitled to information about you, even if they pay your tuition. If you're a parent of a college student, please be aware that your kid is considered an adult by their institution, and professors aren't just being obstructionist jerks when they want read can't give you information. Story 5, I got caught off guard during a conference with the parents of 2 students. I didn't expect it to go south because both students were doing fairly well, but it did. One parent was absolutely furious that her daughter wasn't doing as well as her son furious with me. That is, I was obviously giving him more support than her daughter. I couldn't get her to give me any specifics about what it was she wanted me to do differently, of course. She just wanted to lay into me about my ability to do my job. Probably the most frustrating part of being a teacher is being blamed for things that you have no control over. Student gets a B instead of an A. You obviously taught the material poorly. Sigh. Story 6, at a parent-teacher conference, I had a mother say that her daughter was worthless unless she learned English better because her daughter wasn't pretty enough to amount to anything in life. The daughter was there and needed to translate for her mother several times. Edit, the mom spoke passable English enough to say most things. The daughter only translated a couple words here and there, but still, her English was better than mom's. Story 7, my mom is a teacher, and her worst was at an open house conference type thing. The 2 parents of a kid were getting a divorce, and apparently it was pretty rough. Both decided to go to the event that night. Well, they got into a fight about something, and it heated up to the point where the wife started getting physical. My mom couldn't stop them, so they had to call the police. Our elementary schools don't really have conferences because there's typically no need to. So they just have a night where all the parents can show up and the teacher tries to talk to all of them. So 25 8-year-olds are watching 2 parents get into a physical fight. Story 8, students whose parents work in the building, teachers, custodians, assistants, cafeteria workers, etc., are the worst. If the kid isn't in, you tell their parent, you have to continue to work with that parent long after the kid is gone. I had a student in middle school who was late to my class every day with a pass from his mom. I ended up having to go to the principal and have him take care of it. Story 9, I had this of a kid when I taught 8th grade. No matter what I call home about, his mom would make excuses and yell at me. Kid is talking, I need better classroom management. Kid is picking on others. Well, they probably bullied him first because of his weight, and what was I going to do to punish them? One day, he calls me over and tells me he needs to go change his pants because his penis is so big it was like a man's, his quote, and his pants were too tight and painful. He then grabs it through his pants to show me the outline. I had to report him for harassment, and there was an investigation. He got removed from my class. His mom told the school that I was never allowed to speak to her son again, and that the whole situation was my fault because I looked too young to be teaching 8th graders. Story 10, similar threads. For those interested, check out Rub Post for more. 1. Worst thing a student has said. 2. Funny things in classrooms. 3. Notes to parents. 4. Helicopter parent. 5. Students doing weird things. 6. More students doing weird things. 7. Cheating on tests, etc. 8. Worst student ever. 9. Teachers saying things to the class that they have regretted. 10. Teachers of Reddit. What is the dumbest thing a student has ever said to you, and then insisted that they were right? 11. Teachers. What is the worst experience you have had with a student's parent? Enjoy. Over 50K comments total in these babies. Edit Kevin updated Teachers of Reddit. What's the worst thing you have heard a colleague say about a student? NSFW Teachers of Reddit. What's the most cringeworthy thing a student has said in class? What did that one teacher at your school get fired for? What is the sickest burn you have seen a teacher give to a student? Teachers of Reddit. What is the greatest way a student has misinterpreted one of your assignments? Teachers, professors of Reddit. How did you secretly get back at that kid? Teachers of Reddit. What are the most annoying things that students do that you can't punish them for? Teachers of Reddit. Have you ever had a real genius in class? What made him or so smart? Who is the worst teacher you've ever had? Ed Teachers of Reddit. What is the craziest misconception you have cleared up? Who is the worst teacher you've ever had? My 1 year as a teacher. I called a parent because he was kicking other students during class. Her response, not my little angel. I was then notified I'd be attending a conference with this parent and the principal. She called me a racist and demanded I be fired. The principal had my back, but only in private after the parent left. The mom must have told her son what she said, because I was greeted the next day by my almost entirely black orchestra defending my honor. Story 11. I work at an international school. For the most part, the students are fairly well behaved, like anywhere else. However, there are exceptions. There was one student, let's call him Bob. Bob was a very difficult student in numerous ways. He was disruptive, lazy, and rude. I had him in 3 different courses the same year. Near the end of the last one, I was helping him after school with an assignment. The thing was, Bob actually had some ability in math and had managed to write enough correct answers when I woke him up during tests. So he still had a chance to pass this particular course. The assignment in question was long overdue. It was more than an hour after class had ended on a Friday, I believe, and I was just generally tired of Bob's antics and lack of effort the whole year. While I'm helping him with the problem, he turns to me and says, "Do you ever just feel like a total failure? Because you're a teacher." Like a huge failure. Me, I want to aim so much higher than that. I took a few seconds to collect myself. Bear in mind that this student was over 20 years old and was failing a grade 10 applied math class. When I was his age, I was wrapping up an honors degree. The tuition his parents were paying to keep him in school was more than my university tuition. It took all of my patience and self-control to calmly explain that I didn't feel like a failure, that I enjoyed my job, and that if he wanted to aim much higher, he might have to put in a little more effort than he currently was at some point. That is my worst so far. Edit Bob has since dropped out. Story 12. This isn't the scariest or the most serious example, but this one dad pissed me off pretty badly one time. He came to drop off his 2 daughters and then asked me to speak to one of my fellow instructors who we shall call Sarah. We have a pretty standard policy of not offering up staff to irate parents until that staff member is given a heads up and agrees to speak with them. I gave him the standard. "Sarah isn't here right now, but can I help you with something?" And Dad proceeds to explain how his 6-year-old was forced to go outside during a thunderstorm today before to look for a ring Sarah had lost. He said all the other girls in his daughter's class were forced to spend a long time outside while it was raining looking for the teacher's ring, and his daughter had come home covered in mud. I thought this was strange and didn't seem like something Sarah would do. If anything, I imagined she would have just looked for her ring herself. I told him we would discuss it as a staff and take the appropriate action. When I talked to Sarah about the incident, she was incredulous. It hadn't been raining very heavily the day before, and Sarah and another staff had had all the little kids after lunchtime. Normally when they would go outside and play, Sarah found a plastic pool toy shaped like a ring, went outside to our playground and hid it, and then told the girls that they could choose between staying inside and playing board games or joining her outside on a quest to find a magical ring that had been tragically lost. Most kids opted for the epic quest, and while it had been kind of muddy, the kids had a ball. They still bring it up every once in a while. I guess this particular girl either didn't really get what was going on, or she got in trouble for being muddy and threw a mess Sarah under the bus. My guess is the latter. Story 13, not a teacher, but I've been coaching for 2 years, and I had a parent ask me to come early day to talk about their kid. I thought there was a health issue or something, so I agreed. Turned out the parent was furious that their kid wasn't allowed to compete at real meets, even though they had only been diving for a few months. And it takes about 2 years to really get everything down to be able to compete. She wanted me to let her kid go to regionals the next week, a meet you have to qualify for, when her child only knew how to do 2 dives, and you need 11 to go. Suffice to say, at the end of the session, she pulled her kid out of diving to find a sport with a more immediate payoff. Story 14, I once had a girl in my elective class who was struggling with her mathematics. She wasn't going to college for anything math-related and wasn't performing very well worse in the class. I first told her that she may want to consider taking a different class during her junior year while she still could. That way, she could return to this class as a senior if she still felt inclined to do so. As the brain matures, ability to understand mathematics increases, her parents went nuts, basically taking it like I was saying her daughter was too stupid to take the class. I had emails saying how they were going to get me fired. They called and emailed the principal to try to make it happen. I had a 99 approval rating from all students, the highest in the school. They were the one. These were helicopter parents. Their kids got away with everything. The daughter didn't take advantage of it much. She was a sweetheart, but their son sure did. He knew he could do whatever he wanted, and if the school tried to stop him, he'd just cry foul, and his parents would support him. He died driving too fast around a corner. I blame the parents. Story 15, I was yelled at for an hour for not giving an A to a student. This is quite common since I teach AP Physics. What's uncommon is that this mother was pissed because she promised her son in first grade that if he got an A in every class, they would buy him a car when he graduated. Nice way to prioritize education. Lady, we teach for others to learn, not to get a letter. When I told her if you wanted him to get straight as, why didn't you just enroll him in an underwater basket weaving class? She SDFU pretty quick. Story 16, I had this student who was diagnosed with a couple mental issues, but which in no way affected his academic abilities. He was also gifted and talented and attended extra courses. Because of this kid had almost every adult he had ever met wrapped around his finger. I vowed not to be one of them. Basically, he would pull all kinds of like not doing his homework, playing games on his school-issued iPad during class, not responding and ignoring teachers and other adults when spoken to, lying, manipulation of kids and adults. Basically a piece of work his parents always took aside. They never thought it was possible that their child could have any fault. So, whenever he was written up, sent to the office, they would email or call that evening to complain. By the time he got to my classroom, this had been going on for years. The administration had all but given up because the parents were that exhausting. I was writing this kid up nearly once a week all year. If it were any other kid, he would have probably been suspended multiple times and possibly removed from the school. But because the parents were such huge pains, the school couldn't deal anymore. So he got away with murder, essentially. It was extremely exhausting and frustrating, but I never stopped. I refused to back down on this kid or his parents, even after the principals had all but told me nothing was going to happen. This kid is going nowhere fast, and it pisses me off to no end to know that it is almost entirely his parents' fault in this case. Story 17, I used to teach in a third world country 2 years ago, and I had an autistic child in my class. He was extremely brilliant and kind, but was always alone. I decided one day to give his parents a call and tell them what a wonderful student he was and wanted to meet with the parents to work on improving his social skills. The mother was shocked and told me that this was the first time any teacher would ever call for this purpose. Usually, teachers called during his outburst to complain. I found out later on by the mother that whenever this student was misbehaving or not acting normal, his father would beat him. I then scheduled an emergency meeting with both parents and the principal to confront the father. Long story short, the father thought this method was the best method to get his son to act appropriately. But after thoroughly talking to him about he is making his child worse, he started to worry. It took many meetings and hard work, but by the end of the year, the father improved tremendously. My student and his mother still keep in contact with me. When I travel back, I usually go to the school to see him, and he's the first one of my students to run and give me a hug. I forgot to mention that I was teaching second grade. Also, at the beginning of the year, the child's parents were trying their best to help the other students to befriend their child by buying them gifts and treats. Another thing the mother later told me is that her husband was a good man, but came from an abusive home. He thought that this would also work on his child. Story 18 from my wife. I had a student whose parent requested a meeting with all the kids' teachers before the school year. She came in with this packet called 101. The blank is the kid's name. Rather than try to fix her kid's problems, she went out of her way to write a book on all the special accommodations her kid requires, trying to get teachers to focus just on him. Since none of these accommodations were official through the state, we weren't required to do any. Story 19, obligatory not a teacher, but happened to one of the teachers I was close to my music teacher senior year, is the sweetest person ever. I graduated, but we're still close and talk regularly. There was a guy in my class who only took the class on the idea that he could use guitar as his instrument, which would have been completely fine, except he couldn't read the sheet music and failed almost every playing test because of it. My teacher called his mom to explain why he was getting such a bad mark in the class after constant harassment for contact throughout the year, and the woman just tore her apart and was extremely rude and disrespectful to my teacher, even though she had several valid reasons for failing him in the Class X. Failed playing theory tests, constantly talking out of turn, disruptive, etc. I came in on my lunch because we were getting ready for our spring concert that night and had some last-minute stuff to do with several of my friends and my teacher. I walked into the music room, and my poor teacher was in tears. I felt so bad for her. The shitty part about it is that the kid's mom teaches kindergarten at my old grade school, has for years, and is still one of the nastiest people I've met. Story 20, in recent memory, I have a deaf student, and her parents don't know sign language, while her mom knows a little, and dad knows none. At back-to-school night, dad kept talking about how she needs to set her sights lower for her career plans. Most of the time, I never hear from parents. 170 kids per year, and 15 show up for back-to-school night type stuff. That's the worst. Story 21, my middle school French teacher told us the story of the kid who tried to do his whole assignment by putting it through Google Translate. The teacher even asked him if he used Google Translate. He denied it. Even the parents came in and vouched for their son. The whole thing was in Spanish. Story 22, one of my teachers, who was probably older than the Queen of England, had been teaching for like 300 years before she had our class. She was a true relic. She also loved stories about awful parents and how they've changed over the years. She really liked the story of one of her earlier years, when a father insisted on bringing a child with him to the conference. And every time she said something negative, the father turned to his son with a look of pure vitriol, and the son looked up at him with wide eyes. She says the son was doing fairly well in the class and showed no signs of harm or abuse, but that the father had a look so terrifying that she herself was scared, and she went on to give the kid positive reviews after that, just because it frightened her so much. She met the father a few years later when she went to a florist, and it turned out he's a florist and a very happy-go-lucky guy. I think the story, she says, is the worst were the parents who came in and were blaming the school system for everything wrong with their child. At this time, she was a more storied teacher, so she could handle them better as they yelled at her for ruining their sweet little angel, and how they would have to take matters into their own hands later that night. She informed the principal, and she's not 100% sure what happened, but apparently those parents were abusive and the child was removed from their home. She got teary as she told this to us and pleaded with us to tell her if there was anything wrong at home. She also had some funny stories. My personal favorite is one from the early 80s when a set of parents came into the meeting wearing fairly revealing swimsuits and apologizing, saying they forgot to bring a change of clothes. The dad was wearing basically just spandex, shades, and a pick in his huge fro. They were apparently very courteous, and their daughter was a very good student. But it just shocked her that parents would come to a meeting like that. She had loads of funny stories. Story 23, I had one 5-year-old who was a pain in every once. He would get a little goofy, rampage, fall still, and get tired. He never remembered all that he would pull each rampage, so we couldn't really help him correct his behavior. This happened 7 to 10 times every day, and then one of the teachers put 2 and 2 together. He was having seizures. His rampages were his body preparing his brain for the impending episode. We approached this with his mom, and this is what we noticed. We think it's important that he get checked away. She insisted it was evil spirits and pulled her son out of school. She taught 4th grade at the local elementary. Edit, since people are asking, we were a small private preschool. Education laws are weird, and because teachers are not doctors, we cannot diagnose and then report neglect if the parent does not follow up. We are only allowed to document what we see and approach the topic with the parent. If the parent does nothing or believes even obvious medical problems are caused by spirits, we are required by law to respect their decision. All we can do is hope to cover our own with a file on the child, and hope future teachers find similar issues and tell the parent about the problem enough to convince them to seek medical help. If his issues get worse, and his mom tries to come after us about never noticing, we have a clear paper trail to say we try to help. TLDR kid got moved to a different school, still lacking appropriate help, because education nowadays is about respect and not facts. Story 24, not a teacher, but my sister is For her, it was knowing a student whose dad was abusive. I think what made it worse was the fact that the child in question reminded her of her own and how they talked and the gestures they made. The father was eventually kicked out by the mother. Story 25. I know this is a thread for teachers and terrible parenting, but as there's not a serious tag, I have something to say. So many of these stories are reminding me of myself as a teenager. I was a rotten, bitchy, promiscuous little smart that never did my work and mouthed off a lot. My parents were the I don't care type rather than the special snowflake type. Dad was too busy and mom didn't care and still doesn't. Enough of that though. I just wanted to say I'm sorry from every miserable little of a teenager that doesn't really mean it. I'm sorry. Most of you are doing the best you can, but you can't help a kid that doesn't want help. I have no excuse, really, but from the bottom of my heart, I apologize. I had some truly great teachers that tried so hard with me, and I wish I had appreciated that back then. Story 26 to know if this is too late to comment. But here goes. I'm a swimming teacher. Although this isn't majorly relevant, I've had a few ridiculous experiences when working. The worst incident I had was when it was the last week of the swimming block. And as a collective, all of the teachers were playing some fun games with the children before we stopped for the week or two break. One of the kids, as I was swimming by, had been pushed off his float by another child, so I kindly picked him up to make sure he was okay. As he got to the top of the water, he punched me straight in the mouth because he thought I was the one that pushed him off. I took the boy out of the water and spoke to him saying that he shouldn't hit people in the lessons, etc. But he didn't seem to care. At the end, when I went up to speak to his mom, the parent said to me, "Well, you must have deserved it." Let's go, kid. I was so taken aback by this, I had no idea what to do or say. The worst part of it was that the kid wasn't even in my class. Story 27. I had a parent who said, "I have 3 kids, and my kids have never lied in their lives." My administrator and I ended the conference after this statement because we realized the parent was delusional and we were wasting our time. This parent also signed each email DR, but she never used punctuation and had a tendency to misspell words left and right. Her email signature indicated she had a doctorate in education. I had actually taught all 3 of her kids at one time or another. All 3 kids were lazy and never participated in class or completed assignments. This parent would email every day about something, and it eventually got to the point I stopped replying to the emails or just forwarded the emails to the principal saying I'm not responding to this because I've already explained XYZ multiple times, and I wasn't the only teacher who received this treatment. Every teacher who had one of her kids had to deal with this behavior. Story 28. One of my friends who works at a university in the geology department was contacted by a very angry parent that their son was being flunked or something, and had made some kind of challenge of, "You have so many students in your class that you don't even know who any of them are." So he went to go search for the student and found there was absolutely no record of the student having taken any of his classes. He started to worry because it was approaching the end of the year and he could find absolutely no record of the student whatsoever, but the student had an ID and everything. So he did exist at the university. Later, it was found that the parent was yelling at the wrong department. The student was flunking geography and the parent did not know the difference between the two. But most professors at the university level have a wonderful protection where unless the student has actually given permission, the professors are not allowed to speak to the parents at all on the student's behalf. And the majority of those children who have helicopter parents do not give any permission whatsoever for their parents to see how they're doing. I'm sure they tell their parents, "I've been telling them you're allowed to have access to records. I don't know what is going wrong." Story May 29th. Get lost, but this has to be told. Girl of 14. I will call her Rosie, is violent towards students and staff. This is not simply kicking and hitting others' rough area. This is throwing tables, cutting off a girl's hair, smashing a window, kicking in a door. You name the offense, and she has most likely done it. Her brother was expelled for similar behavior, so her mom was not happy with the school. Also, before the questions, we would expel, but schools have rules regarding numbers of exclusions, and we reached ours. Yes, there are ways to do it, but the school don't like how it looks. Anyway, one incident occurred last month where this girl videoed herself beating up an 11-year-old as a joke. There was no reason, given she apparently thought the girl found it funny. The girl had to be taken to hospital to check that the knock to the head was not serious. So Rosie is temporarily excluded. Mom comes in to discuss the event and is arguing Rosie's case, explaining that the girls were joking. We have CCTV and video, and Rosie's mom insists the CCTV missed the joke. Anyway, a strongly worded, handwritten but photocopied letter arrives on my desk, and 3 others. May I add that I was simply one of Rosie's teachers. I was not SD. The incident or the meeting not have any control in school policy. But the letter threatens to sue us, but not for unfair suspension. Rather, Rosie's mom has found through her extensive research that we have two strict bullying rules and policy that is discrimination, and that Rosie was a victim of rigid policy on bullying. As far as complaints go, I don't think anything can now shock me. Story 30 not as bad as the comment so far, but we did have a parent who likes to call and come in constantly. She found a way to mention in every sentence, as you know, my husband is a doctor, to assert authority, as if she hadn't done anything significant in life. Story 31, I've got a top 3, from least to worst. Drum roll, please. 3, a parent of a former student of mine with autism. All of my students have autism, was also on the spectrum herself. She was a single parent. She was so terrified of doctors she couldn't bring herself to take her son to one. Granted, her son fought pretty hard at the doctor. When he went, so it was unpleasant. The summer before he became my student, he got a really bad sinus infection. Other than giving him some decongestant when she could get it in him, he was untreated for the whole summer and eventually closed his eyes because of the pressure. When he finally in October started opening his eyes again, he couldn't see. It was a terrible year of trying to convince mom to take him to doctors, which she eventually did, only to find out he had lost most of his vision due to the sinus infection. Still makes me emotional to this day. The only reason it happened is because he has autism and he needed an advocate to be his voice. 2, I taught a kid who was in and out of her home with SES. She also has autism. Mom had no idea what she was doing. She lived in a very low-income area and had a lot of friends over. This student was somewhat verbal and would tell us about the friends from time to time. We had several run-ins with mom because of reports to CAS over the years, but they couldn't get her out of the house until one day she told us about a friend touching her. I don't think I've been so angry about anything ever. I had several talks with mom about protecting her from abusers. One of the most behaviorally explosive kid I've ever dealt with was screaming in our classroom for 3 to 4 hours a day. She was in no way able to handle group situations and needed to be in 11 therapy, but that is hard to come by. So after 2 years of begging, mom finally put her on anxiety meds to help take the edge off. It was glorious. Then mom started inventing all sorts of side effects she was witnessing, and without telling anyone or talking to Dr. rip her off her meds, forcing her child to suffer from withdrawal and sending her back in a crisis. This happened twice while I taught that kid. I have a therapist now. Parents like this start to wear on you after a while. My relationships with parents have suffered as a result, as I'm far more reluctant to communicate with any of them unless I have to. It's getting better again this year, and I'm working on it. But Jesus Christ, the I have seen, my therapist calls it compassion fatigue. Story 32, I've posted this as another thread, but I've had a parent deliberately make me think her child had been abducted as a test because she hated the school's child protection officer. She arranged for her daughter to be collected by a friend, got her daughter to tell me the friend was her mom. This was in the first week of school, so I was still getting to know the parents, then stormed the school office demanding to know where her daughter was. She kept it up for half an hour, then admitted it had been a test, and she knew exactly where she was. I'd been having visions of reading about her murder on the news, and it all being my fault. I cried. Story 33, either the day the parent of one of my 5th graders broke into the lock-staff parking lot and stole a teacher's car in the middle of the school day, or the father who broke into the school one weekend with his 8 and 10-year-olds in tow, stole 2 TVs, and trashed 3 classrooms. Edit wording. Story 34 had a parent accuse me of randomly dropping her son's grade by 30 for no reason. She would not believe that him getting 20 on a major test could do that to your overall mark. Finally had to show the timestamps on my grading program. She's not even the craziest. Another parent said that me kicking out her distributive son for 5 minuets out of 75 caused him to not learn anything in class, and thus his failing a test was my fault. Story 35, I was a teacher for a bit, but quickly came to regret it. I was out once with my girlfriend at the time when a parent came up to me and told me I shouldn't be out. It was setting a bad example for the students I didn't understand. It was the summer. I was down the shore away from the town I worked in. My girlfriend was wearing a tank top, and I had a t-shirt. No student would want to see their teacher during the off time. The parent kept pressing, though, eventually demanding that I be removed because I was a bad influence. She was raving for a while. I eventually got an email from my boss saying he needed to talk to me. Apparently, I was going to bars and picking up young-looking women, so I was being investigated. I decided and went on whatever. My girlfriend was older than me, actually. Nothing came up with the investigation, and the mother went on a huge rant when she saw me still wandering the school the following year. This was a while ago, but I've since lost the passion to teach and any kind of faith in the education system.